Today, we are taking a stack of sources detailing the life of a Japanese racehorse named Rhein Kraft.
A really fascinating figure.
Oh, absolutely. And our mission for this deep dive into the source material is to unpack her meteorically brilliant, yet, heartbreakingly brief career. We really want to discover how she permanently changed Japanese racing strategy. And not by leaving behind a bloodline, but by forcing a deeply traditional sport to just completely rethink its own rules.
And to really understand her impact, we kind of have to start with her biological foundation. So Rhein Kraft was a filly, which is literally just the racing term for a female horse under the age of 5, born in 2002.
Okay, 2002.
Right. And she never reached her 5th birthday. She wasn't undefeated either. But her genetics are just key here. In racing terms, her sire, meaning her father, was N-sweep. Her dam, or mother, was must be loved. And her broodmare sire, so her maternal grandfather, was Sunday Silence. Honestly, she was bred for incredible things. And her name actually combined her owner's racing prefix, which was Lein, with the German word for strength, Kraft.
Oh, I like that. Rhein Kraft.
Right. And she was put under the guidance of Tsutomu Setoguchi, who was this legendary trainer who handled absolute icons of the sport. Plus, from her debut all the way to her final race, she was ridden exclusively by one jockey, Yuichi Fukunaga.
Which is pretty special in itself. But, before you can change a sport, you need the authority that comes with winning.
Yeah.
You really have to force people to pay attention to you.
Absolutely. You can't be a rebel if you're not winning.
Exactly. And Rhein Kraft, well, she demanded attention instantly. Let's look at her debut race from the sources. They show she demolished the field by 5 lengths.
It demonstrates raw, unrefined, almost terrifying power.
And she followed that up by entering the fantasy stakes and winning that one by 4 lengths. I mean, it wasn't a competition. It was a procession at that point.
Basically, yeah.
But here is where the narrative shifts, right?
Yeah.
Because pure talent is rarely enough for a lasting legacy. She entered the Hanshin juvenile fillies as the heavy favorite. Everyone, and I mean everyone, expected another coronation.
Oh, for sure. It was supposed to be easy.
Right. But instead, she finished 3rd.
Yeah. And when a young horse relies solely on early, explosive speed to dominate, they often become incredibly fragile the moment they get caught in a pack. And it really set the mental foundation she desperately needed for her grueling 3-year-old season.
Because she didn't just fade away after that.
Not at all. She returned the next spring, not just running fast, but racing smart. She defeated these highly talented rivals in her prep races, specifically Air Messiah and Daring Heart, and those two become very, very important later on.
Right. So this sets the stage for the Oka show. This is the first jewel of the Triple Tiara. Now, despite her prep race wins, Rhein Kraft was actually only the 2nd choice here. The heavy favorite was this extraordinary filly named Cesario, who was pretty much destined for greatness.
An absolute powerhouse Cesario.
Right. So you have Daring Heart, Rhein Kraft, and Cesario clashing. But I was looking at the tactical breakdown of this race in the sources, and I'm genuinely a bit confused by Rhein Kraft's strategy here.
How so?
Well, if she has this explosive speed we talked about, why didn't she just blast to the front? The sources say she stalked Daring Heart.
Yeah, so this goes back exactly to the lesson she learned from her loss. Pacing is everything.
Okay.
See, Daring Heart went to the front to set the tempo. If Rhein Kraft had challenged her immediately, they would have just exhausted each other, leaving them both totally vulnerable to horses running behind them.
Like Cesario.
Exactly. By stalking, meaning sitting just behind the leader and letting Daring Heart break the wind resistance, Rhein Kraft conserved her energy.
So she's basically using Daring Heart as a shield.
Precisely. And that requires immense discipline from the horse. She's just waiting for her jockey, Fukunaga, to give the signal.
And then the final stretch arrives. Fukunaga asks for everything, and Rhein Kraft just surges past Daring Heart. The sources highlight her incredible turn of foot, which I know is a term the racing community uses constantly.
Yeah, a turn of foot is basically racing jargon for a sudden, explosive burst of acceleration.
Like hitting the nitrous.
Pretty much. It's the ability to change gears instantly, rather than just building up speed gradually over a long distance. And Rhein Kraft had a lethal turn of foot.
But the race wasn't over, right? Because Cesario came flying down the stretch with this furious late charge.
It was incredibly close.
Rhein Kraft had to use every single ounce of that newfound grit to hold her off, winning by a mere head. That tiny margin earned her first Grade 1 victory. It was a massive milestone for Fukunaga, too.
It was huge. Now, normally, winning the first jewel of the Triple Tiara sets a very rigid path forward. The tradition in Japanese racing is basically ironclad.
Meaning you don't deviate.
Never. If you win the Okusho, you always move on to the Japanese Oaks, which is the second jewel.
The public backlash of abandoning the Triple Tiara would be immense.
Oh, the press would eat you alive.
But Rhein Kraft's team did exactly that. They quit the Triple Tiara path. So why? Why would any trainer throw away a guaranteed shot at history?
It really comes down to a fundamental clash between tradition and biology. They were looking at the data, not the history books.
Okay, tell me about the data.
Well, the Okusho, which she had just won, is 1,600 meters. The Japanese Oaks is 2,400 meters.
That's a big jump.
It's a massive leap. Rhein Kraft was built for speed and power, which was heavily influenced by her sire, N-Sweep. Her physiology likely favored fast twitch muscle fibers.
Which are great for sprinting.
Incredible for explosive sprints. But they burn out quickly, causing rapid lactic acid buildup over long distances. So her team realized that stretching her to 2,400 meters was literally fighting her very biology.
They basically recognized the sunk cost fallacy. Just because they won the first race doesn't mean they were obligated to run the second, especially if it went against the horse's nature.
Spot on. So instead, they opted for the NHK Mile Cup.
Which is back to a mile.
Right. It's exactly her preferred distance of 1,600 meters. But here is the catch. The NHK Mile Cup meant racing against male horses, which adds a whole new layer of physical difficulty.
And this was completely unprecedented. The sources point out that Rhein Kraft, along with her rival Daring Hart, became the first Okusho participants in history to skip the Oaks and head directly to the NHK Mile Cup.
Yeah, Daring Hart's camp must have looked at their own filly, saw the exact same biological limitations, and decided to follow Rhein Kraft's rebellious lead.
But it was still a massive risk. It was an incredibly controversial pivot.
Oh, traditionalists heavily doubted her. They thought she was dodging the real test.
And Rhein Kraft answered that by running just a flawless race. Against a mixed field of top-tier males, she raced for midfield, showing that pack discipline again, found a gaff on the rail, and used that lethal turn of foot to accelerate.
It was beautiful to watch.
Daring Hart chased her desperately, but Rhein Kraft won decisively. No dramatic photo finish required this time.
And by winning the NHK Mile Cup, she completed the Okusho NHK Mile Cup double. It was a feat no horse had ever accomplished in the history of Japanese racing.
The historical weight of that specific achievement is just staggering. Even today, decades later, she remains the only horse to complete that double.
The only one.
Even a later superstar mare like Gran Allegria, who is widely considered an absolute legend of the sport, couldn't pull it off. Rhein Kraft stands entirely alone.
It really requires a highly specific type of brilliance because you have to peak physically and mentally for the Okusho against the best fillies in the country, right?
Right.
And then you have to hold that absolute peak form against a mixed field of top milers just weeks later. The biological toll is grueling.
So she proved she could beat tradition, and she dominated a mile. But the big question was, could that speed-heavy biology hold up when the distances got longer and the horses got older?
And that brings us to the autumn of her 3-year-old season, which really tested the absolute limits of her endurance.
Right. She entered the Rose Stakes and finished second, losing to Air Messiah. And this sets up an incredible rivalry for the Fukunaga, which is the final jewel of the Triple Tiara.
Yeah, and that one is run over 2,000 meters.
This race is honestly a heartbreaker to read about in the sources. Rhein Kraft tries a new tactic. Knowing the distance is pushing her limits, she tries to control the race from the very front.
Right, setting her own pace.
Exactly. And she fights bravely all the way down the long stretch. But in the literal final strides, Air Messiah catches her and wins by a single neck.
A neck. I mean, at 40 miles per hour, a neck is fractions of a second. It is literally the time it takes you to blink.
It's agonizing.
Agony.
But the fascinating thing is that losing this race actually made her more popular.
Oh, for sure.
The doubters who criticized her for skipping the 2,400-meter Oaks said she couldn't handle anything beyond a mile. They expected her to completely collapse at 2,000 meters.
They wanted her to fail.
Right, but she nearly won it. She fought tooth and nail against a horse perfectly suited for that exact distance. She proved her courage wasn't, limited by her fast-twitch muscle fibers.
And she followed that up by racing against older, fully mature horses in the mile championship and finished a very impressive third, which all culminated in the end-of-year award vote for Best 3-Year-Old Filly.
And this vote, Man, it perfectly captures the agonizing margins of this sport. You have Rhein Kraft, the historic Okasho and NHK Mile Cup winner,
Yep.
and you have Cesario, the horse Rhein Kraft, actually beat by a head in the Okasho.
But, and this is a big but, Cesario had gone on to win the Japanese Oaks, and then she traveled all the way to the United States and won the American Oaks, which carried massive international prestige.
Wow. Okay, so the voters had to choose between Rhein Kraft's unprecedented domestic double and Cesario's international glory. And the result? Cesario won the award by just 9 votes.
9 votes out of hundreds cast.
It's just wild.
The racing community was completely torn. I mean, it really shows just how fiercely competitive this specific generation of fillies was.
So as a 4-year-old, Rhein Kraft seemed poised to take over the world. She had the experience, the speed, the grit. Her 4-year-old season started with an experiment, actually.
Yeah, they dropped her down to 1,200 meters.
Right, which is a pure chaotic sprint. And she finished an excellent second. Then she stepped back up to a mile and won the Hanshin Himba Stakes. Everything was lining up perfectly for her to dominate the newly created Victoria Mile. She was the heavy favorite.
But then she just had a genuinely bad day.
Yeah. She broke poorly from the starting gate. She got trapped inside the field, couldn't find her rhythm, overraced, and faded to a shocking 9th place.
Which happens.
The mechanics of racing are fragile, and champions have bad days. The plan was entirely rational. Rest her over the summer, target the Sprinter Stakes in the autumn, and just come back stronger.
It was a solid plan.
But fate had other plans, and this is the part of the sources that is just devastating to read. On August 19, 2006, while she was resting and doing light training, Rhein Kraft suddenly collapsed.
The diagnosis was acute heart failure. She died instantly on the track.
She was only 4 years old.
It's just tragic.
The racing world was stunned. You have this incredibly bright star, one of the defining athletes of her generation, and she vanishes almost overnight. It leaves you with this heavy what if? Like, what if she had run the Sprinter Stakes? What if she had raced at 5?
Right. But honestly, the most profound what if is about her bloodline. Because while Rhein Kraft's story ended abruptly on that training track, the stories of her rivals continued for decades, shaping the very genetic makeup of Japanese racing.
Let's look at Cesario, for example. She went on to become one of the greatest broodmares in Japanese history.
Unbelievable producer.
Yeah, she produced absolute champions horses like Epiphania, Ryan Deeds, and Sartol Narlia. And Air Messiah, the filly who beat Rhein Kraft by a neck, she produced a massively popular and successful horse named Air Spinell.
And there is also this incredible detail from the sources from 2020. An undefeated triple tiara filly emerged named Daring Tact. And if you look at Daring Tact's family tree, she is remarkably a granddaughter of both Cesario and Daring Heart.
That is amazing. So the fillies Rhein Kraft battled against literally shaped the next 2 decades of the sport. Their physical descendants are everywhere.
Everywhere.
But Rhein Kraft left no offspring, no sons or daughters to carry that line prefix. Her genetic legacy is essentially a ghost. Which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. If she didn't leave physical descendants, what is her true legacy?
Well, she left a paradigm shift. Because of Rhein Kraft, that once unthinkable route going from the Okasho directly to the NHK Mile Cup and skipping the Oaks entirely became a legitimate established option.
Because trainers and owners of fillies with speed-oriented pedigrees, they looked at what Rhein Kraft accomplished. They realized they didn't have to be prisoners to tradition anymore.
Right, they saw proof that it could work.
They didn't have to force a fast-twitch miler to suffer through 2,400 meters just because societal expectations demanded it. Rhein Kraft proved that the biology of the athlete should dictate the path, not the history books.
And every single time a major mare today skips the Oaks and heads for the NHK Mile Cup, they're walking the exact path that Rhein Kraft carved out of the wilderness. She gave the sport a new way of thinking.
Which is huge.
It is. And in a highly traditional structure like Japanese horse racing, changing the collective mindset is arguably much harder than winning any single race.
It really leaves you with something to chew on.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.